Welcome to our compilation, thoughtfully curated for those of you who may have missed out on some of our captivating videos. Whether you're seeking an engaging pastime or simply looking for something to occupy your attention, you've come to the right place. If boredom has caught up with you and you're in need of a backup that brings both intrigue and entertainment, make sure to hit the like and subscribe for this channel. Don't forget to enable notifications. Leave timestamps in the comments section, spotlighting the videos you wholeheartedly recommend to fellow viewers. Without further ado, let's enjoy. What are some very creepy facts? Story 1. It is legal to publicly hang people in Texas, as well as paddle school kids, as long as you're a principal, but illegal to have an abortion, even if you and the child would perish if you went on too long in pregnancy. Also, apparently, a lot of people think Texas can secede from the U.S., even though the whole premise of when Texas was a lone country was that it was basically America, and people were ecstatic when the U.S. asked Texas to join. I also talked to a teacher who has seen a principal paddle a kid. Had to legally be there, and was a long time ago. The law was probably made after a principal had a bit of a kink for it. They basically just use a shortened oar with holes in it, so it could go as fast as possible. At that point, it definitely goes into assault, but do politicians care? No, they don't. Also, don't try to eat one of those cactuses that look like a bunch of green plates welded together without first skinning it with a knife large enough so you don't cut a finger or three due to having the knife be small, so you need to have your hand close. It is biological and strives off having randomness, so there could, possibly, I don't know, be a large spine or two. And don't pet the deer. If they were slightly larger, they would confront predators head-on more. And my mom lives out in the woods with a friend of hers. The deer out there are getting a little too comfy now that summer's rolling around. They'll actually take shade under the trees or actually even under the house late at night. The idea that they always run away when they see people is not exactly true. Sometimes they're known to actually stand up and square up like they're about to really start something. Story 2. I knew about the hearing fact through the Army, and kind of a messed up and funny story. We were doing CLS, Combat Lifesaver training, and we had these high-speed dummies that breathed, blinked, and bled to get us accustomed to the symptoms, and my team was freaking out. I was keeping the airway open, and the dummy was bleeding horribly from a leg amputation. I knew that if they didn't get their stuff together, we would fail, and I fell back on my standard response to traumatic stuff, humor. So with a straight face, I looked at the dummy and said, "So good news, bud. You'll be able to get your boots half off after this." My team stared at me like I was a lunatic before they started laughing. Medic tried to fail me for being an unfeeling monster when the trainer told her that if he were in that dummy's position, he'd be laughing right along with us, and explained the hearing being the last sense to go before you perish. Still makes me grin to look back and have such a stupid memory. The hearing is the last thing to go? That reminds me of The Princess Bride at the end where, spoiler alert, Wesley threatens to disfigure the Count in battle but leaves his ears intact, just so that everyone can hear all the gasps and cries when they see that person. For a charming and funny movie, that's a pretty gruesome little part of it. Story 3. I remember that set of questions, but one thing kind of interesting about MJ. A good number of the kids who were said to have been touched came forward years later, saying they hadn't been touched, or that they were never allowed near his bedroom when he was attempting to sleep, that they had bunk rooms, etc. It's messed up because a lot of people, even those in the music industry, say he abused them, But we also have some cases of people claiming nothing happened. I mean, most likely that someone wanted to cash in on possible abuse and knew they could do it, and that they would get away with it. This is why we have issues with people claiming something is false as well, and why people tend to believe abuse victims in some cases if the person is famous. That's also one reason why I very much dislike people that claim abuse to get someone back for something, like dumping them, or just because they dislike them. Penn and Teller had an interesting take on this. They showed 2 different cookbooks that were supposedly based on the type of foods that Elvis liked. Each one claimed that a certain type of peanut butter sandwich was his favorite, but they both had very different recipes. At this point, we probably will never know the real truth about what happened with MJ. Or maybe we won't know until many years from now, when someone will finally set the record straight on exactly what his legacy was. What's extremely rare, but people think it's very common? Story 1. I'm an epileptic. I have generalized epilepsy. And if you like, here's a little more information on epilepsy. Most epileptics tend to have this thing called an aura, like a feeling they get before they have a seizure. I personally have never had an aura in my experience. Also, for anyone that may be curious, here are some of the different types of seizures. Firstly, the 2 generalized ones. Grand mal, tonic-clonic seizures, the classic blackout, spasm, and absent seizures, rapid blinking or staring into space. These usually last roughly 6 seconds. Also, fun fact about the tonic-clonic seizures, the tonic part is where your muscles go stiff, and the clonic part is where your limbs shake. And yes, there's also such a thing as tonic seizures and clonic ones as well. Simple partial focal seizures, or auras. There can be a rising feeling in your stomach, a feeling of déjà vu even, tingling in your arms or legs and stiffness or twitching in places such as your arm or hand. This isn't all, this is just all I can remember. There's also myoclonic seizures where your body suddenly twitches or jerks, like you've had an electric shock. They don't tend to last long though, only about a second. And finally, the last type of seizure I can remember, atonic seizures. Unlike tonic seizures, where your muscles stiffen, your muscles instead suddenly relax. Also, now you know from the video that flashing lights are uncommon to cause seizures. Here's 3 that are more common. Stress, lack of sleep, alcohol. Yes, alcohol. It can mess with your medication and cause it to not work or not work as well. Also, not every epileptic has daily or weekly drop-down tonic-clonic seizures. That's a big thing that media seems to make sound normal. I have possibly daily absent seizures. It's hard to tell if they happen, and my grand mal seizures are rare, though long. Example, 10 minutes being my shortest one and 75 minutes being my longest. Haven't had one since 2020 and didn't have one for 4 years until then. I think the scary part is just seeing someone else have a seizure. I mean, the scariest part for someone who doesn't have a seizure. I have no idea what it's like to be in the middle of a seizure. That's probably more terrifying. And it seems like it continues in the next story. Story 2. The amount of times I've told people I have it, and the worry they get instantly and all that for the stereotypical type. Every person thought that. I've had to explain more to people about it than not. Also, not everyone with epilepsy is photosensitive. I have a photosensitivity to certain things, but they're very specific, and it's not all flashing lights. I'm able to watch something or play a game with those warnings. Stress and panic, hyperventilating, is my main trigger to having seizures. Only a few times in my life have I had the stereotypical type, all within the same year. 1 second I'm doing something, and the next I'm on the floor, dazed and confused. Though I had fallen asleep half of those times and was just having a hard time waking up from how tired I was from the muscle contractions. I also had bitten my tongue due to that, but was numb for a while to it. The amount of blood in my mouth I would have, bitten entire chunks off my tongue and inner cheeks. Then, later on, I would feel the pain in my mouth severely after the numbing feeling fades, and boy, does it suck. It took like a week or more to heal, and could barely eat anything, and all I wanted to do was sleep through the pain as much as I could. After that year of having those only a few times, they've stopped. This was back in 2018, but I still have the same absence seizures I always have for almost 10 years now. Sucks sometimes, and I have a fear of going out and can't be learning how to drive or work in most environments because what if I had a seizure and severely injure myself? Like I literally don't even go near an open oven or hot stove in fear I'll burn myself, even from my typical seizure. It could happen. Holding knives are hard too because I could end up dropping it. Usually when I have absence seizures, though, I somehow always keep hold of whatever I have. The absence seizure is something I wasn't aware of. It doesn't really sound like a seizure. It just sounds like you freeze up. Well, okay, I was going to say freeze up, like someone's absent and just stops for a bit. Freeze up kind of sounds like a seizure. That's kind of scary too. Story 3. My little sister is a professor at Berkeley and Boston as well as New England Conservatory. She tours the world and was nominated for a Grammy this year. I was on a similar path. Started college on a massive music scholarship for multiple instruments at the age of 14. Music lessons started at age 3, and we had no life outside of lessons and performing. We were homeschooled on and off. Friendships rarely lasted, and we reached adulthood with major psychiatric issues. I know a lot of successful and even famous musicians. I won't say they all hate their lives, but depression and substance abuse is rampant. After completing my music degree at 17, I chose not to apply to grad school. I'd seen what it would take to be successful, and it wasn't worth it. Now, I'm a mom of 3 living a super traditional life in rural Idaho. Most people don't even know I was a child prodigy, though I've always supplemented the family income teaching music lessons. I see my sister about once per year because she's so busy. She didn't even mention the Grammy nomination. I just happened to stumble across the red carpet photos on social media. She's such a hard worker and incredibly well-talented and makes really good money, but her level of stress is not sustainable. Even when she's telling me about having breakfast with Elizabeth Warren or getting front row seats with John Mulaney, I'm not remotely jealous. It doesn't even sound fun. I'd never give up my little house on the prairie life or my children for her fame and money. Normal lives are sorely underrated. From what she's saying, the depression that hits child prodigies seems common. It doesn't seem rare. Are there any child prodigies that don't fall into substance abuse or depression? I can imagine they'd be busy all the time because they're in demand. Does anyone have any control of their life instead of just their music? Kind of sounds like they're all getting taken advantage of. When people met their high school bully as an adult. Stories? Story 1. In high school, I was terribly emotionally bullied by this one girl who thinks so highly of herself in my class. The bullying went on for 3 years during that time. She would sweet-talk me into giving her some stuff such as chocolates, stationery, etc. I was labeled as the quiet and shy girl at the moment, so I was an easy target for her and her stupid gang. I don't know why exactly she hated me that much, but I'd always assumed she didn't like quiet people, so she manipulated me to stay by her side so she could ridicule me every day. I was desperate to make new friends at that time, and my social skills weren't that great at all, so I stupidly stayed by her side. One day, she decided to ignore my existence and even tried so hard to replace me with a new transfer student. I was devastated to see my seat in the classroom taken by the new student, but I didn't let my emotions show that much. I simply went to a different seat with a different group. Fortunately, this group is a lot nicer and friendlier than the bullies, so I gladly befriended them. Meanwhile, my bullies started to have a rough time catching up with the lectures because I've always been their backbone since the very start. I was the one who managed their group projects, answering questions, and I even allowed them to plagiarize my assignments. As days passed by, their group began to crumble, thus ending up becoming a complete burden to the whole class. I just sat at my place and quietly observed them as they fought with each other. Honestly, I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy seeing them suffer. I'm jubilant to see them desperately trying to win me back. Too bad for them, I got into a much advanced class the year after. After that, I was never the same anymore. In this new class, I managed to get out of my comfort zone and hone my social skills. Here, I met so many amazing people who treat everyone respectfully, and I also get the chance to be best friends with 3 people in my table group. I was very lucky to be in the same class with them for 2 years because they're awesome. Unfortunately, we had to part ways after graduating high school. I graduated in 2021. It was supposed to be 2020, but COVID kind of ruined it. Now in college, I stumbled upon the very same girl who bullied me for 3 years straight. FYI, my physical appearance was very different when I was in high school than in college. In high school, I looked very feminine and very awkward. Now in college, I look more masculine with my hair being short and all. Plus, I'm more confident nowadays, and I've also gained popularity among the students in my school, so people would always talk about me, which I'm still not used to because I really don't like it when people make me the center of attention. So when the bully saw me, she immediately came to me and started to compliment me and tried really hard to playfully flirt with me. I was beyond disgusted at her behavior as she acted like nothing had happened. I could tell she had no remorse when she bullied me years ago because she never apologized to me whatsoever. For years, I've been thinking, spiraling over the unknown reason as to why she hated me that much. It really messed up my mental health back then. So, in return, I partially ignored her back. I didn't have the guts to completely ignore her because I don't want to be the jerkwad in someone else's eyes. Only a few knew that she'd bullied me, so I don't really like to talk about our past that much. I could visibly see the envy in her eyes as her friends talked so highly of me. Kind of funny when she tried to call me handsome in front of many people so she could win me. But nah, bro, you were a monster to me. This kind of behavior sounds sociopathic. I bet she didn't think she would remember all this behavior. Either that or she tried to worm her way back in by believing she was still very desperate for friends. She didn't think that it would be the case that she actually was able to grow her social skills. It's amazing when you can find the strength within yourself to ignore what you thought was control over you. Story 2. In high school, I had my first bully. He was huge, 6'2", 15 years old, who only got taller as the years went by. A fairly aggressive guy, constantly mouthing off and butting into conversations. Not really popular, but well known. I had nearly every class with him from freshman year to senior year. I can't say he ever beat me up, but his favorite thing to do were pinching, pushing, swats to my body, mainly head, and wedgies. I was also the only person he bullied. People would constantly tell me he was a good guy, just a bit of a jerkwad. Then they would see how he interacted with me and just be like, yeah, I don't know what his issue with you is. It was particularly bad in freshman and sophomore year. I didn't really fear him. I was always just, oh great, him again. Each year when we got the same classes over and over. Some people mistook us as really good friends, mainly because we were always together and would banter between each other. He wasn't always so bad. I remember having some genuinely funny and good conversations with him. There were even times when he would stick up for me. I would lend him pencils because he would always forget. He was still a total jerkwad, though. It's just when I was nice to him, he was nicer. When I would combat his bullying, telling him to back off or swat away his hands, the bullying would get worse. So it was better to just be nice and have things be neutral or positive. It was mentally draining and didn't stop all of it. Some days he was just moody or attention hungry, and he knew he could get what he needed from me. Anyway, when we graduated, he actually said that he would miss me. I told him I would not miss him, and that I thought he was a jerkwad. I hurt his feelings, I could tell, because he stormed off, and that was the last time I saw him. Just recently, actually, I ended up randomly seeing him in a Wawa. The dude's like 6'7". He's hard to miss. I was going to ignore him, but he noticed me almost at the same time. He came over to me and started talking to me. He ended up becoming a trucker, has a large house and pool. It felt like he was bragging. He ended up asking me to dinner, but I declined. Then he asked if I would go sit on the bench outside and talk for a few minutes. I agreed to that, but told him a friend was waiting for me, so not for long. There was no friend waiting, by the way. He explained to me that his high school years were very difficult for him, and that I felt like his only friend. He, for some reason, thought I liked him picking on me. He also confessed to being bisexual and having a huge crush on me, but didn't know how to express it. I was shocked when he told me. He's very macho, so I didn't even consider the possibility. But when I think back, it explains a lot. He ended up giving me his phone number and said that he's changed and we should hang out. I took it to be polite, telling him I would think about it. We've done very casual text between us. He keeps pushing to hang out. I don't know if I'm ready to let my bully back into my life as a friend. He never even apologized, just explained why he did what he did. I'm admittedly more scared of him now than inside school, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because there's no supervision? Anyway, that's how that went almost 3 weeks ago. He still texts me a good morning every day. Sometimes the story is just not crystal clear, black and white. I wonder if it's just reasonable to maybe meet in neutral places for a while. I mean, not go to a house, but maybe go out for coffee. Just be in places where you know you can just get out. This guy still seems like he has trouble making friends. Maybe see what it's like. And if need be, just be expressive. This guy had his chance to talk about what it was all about and explaining what's happening. I think if they really want a relationship, this guy needs to be able to tell his side. Story 3. I have 2 fun ones. 1. I was a senior in high school when this happened. So as most people who went to public schools probably remember, the student teachers who would shadow the teachers during the second half of the second year. For context, I was an emo scene kid. So most of us guys who were in this style had long hair that we would straighten, wore bright colored t-shirts, skinny jeans, and high tops or bulky skate shoes. I was constantly called a girl, fruity, things like that. I played drums in a band that was starting to gain popularity amongst the fellow kids in school, and I also played in a jazz band. One of the kids in my math class was one of those who called me those names. We had this really, really pretty student teacher we will call Hannah. Hannah was a blonde with that ombre hair from 2010 that was popular in that period. I got her phone number in front of this guy, and she even came to my show. Lost touch with her a few years later, but it was so funny that I was the person who got the hot student teacher's phone number. 2. This was when I was in 7th or 8th grade. These kids, we will call Frank and Josh, were absolutely awful to me. I went to a Catholic school and was an outcast as I hadn't attended K-6 there. Frank and Josh at first weren't too bad, but I started to get tormented by Josh for no reason. Frank and I were decent friends until one day he decided to follow the rest of the jerkwads who bullied me. He threw water at me, called me names, and made fun of my clothes. Fast forward to grade 8, Josh decided to continue to bully me, and I threatened him. And then he cried to his mom, who then complained to the principal, and I got expelled because I threatened to really hurt him and he got scared. Mind you, I weighed maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. Fast forward to 2021, Frank is an ex-convict who stole a bunch of things and did some time in prison. Josh works with me at my job. He's lazy and self-terminating. I called him out the first day I worked with him, and told him I forgive him for being a jerk to me. He was living in a broken home, which sucks for anyone. However, I found out he's bad-mouthing me at work, so I make sure to tell my supervisors he's bringing his laptop into work and playing video games instead of doing his job, and now our CEOs and execs are watching us all, and he's on the chopping block. Patience pays off. I wonder if this guy ever went to the principal and confronted him about how these two ended up. One ends up doing time, and the other ends up working for the guy. What kind of job were they doing anyway? Was it IT? And how big is this town? Was it a small town so they would end up working together? Or is it a big town and it's just a coincidence that they ended up working at the same place? What's the dumbest thing you've done in bed? And before we start with that, call me an AI voice now. Call me an AI voice now. I am real. I have to show this. I have to show to the audience that I'm real. I have to show to YouTube and the algorithm. I have to prove to an algorithm that I'm real. make that make sense. So I've got everything set up, got my microphone, can go old school hip hop with you on it. Now that that's out of the way, let's start with the first story. Story 1. Dumbest thing I ever did in bed was confuse an orgasm for a seizure. I forgot exactly what I was doing at the time, but I do remember immediately stopping what I was doing, nearly had a PTSD-induced panic attack because my great-grandmother had a seizure right in front of me a couple years before she passed away, and did the only thing I could think to do in that situation and started cuddling with her partly to prevent her from accidentally hurting herself and partly so I could calm down until she stopped shaking. A little while later, she sits up and asks me why I stopped, and when I told her what I thought was happening to her, she corrected me, explaining, no, she just had an orgasm and wasn't ready for me to stop yet. I could have kept going and she would have been fine, but the whole I thought you had a seizure thing kind of killed the mood for the rest of the night. So, does this guy not give women orgasms usually? There's always these complaints that women don't complete during these kinds of things, and either this guy just didn't do that or had done it before, and the women's orgasms of his past were more subtle. I don't know. What do you think? Let's move on. Story 2. How to tweak your slap to perfection. Find one of those old punching bag machine games that measures your punch, slap it instead, start low, and then after you've done so, turn to your significant other and do the same level to her, and now you have a way to rate how hard you need to hit. I'm definitely not someone who's into this, but hopes this helps those who are. Because you people scare the hell out of me thinking I'm going to accidentally unalive someone with a slap, so I'd never do it. Too long didn't read? Slap a punching bag machine that measures your punch. There are some Japanese video games where you actually do slap a butt, and I don't know if those would aid in the bedroom or not. I don't know if there's any kind of correlation you can make to those. I don't think that's what they had when they designed them. But yeah, I just don't know the kind of society we live in when we look to a punching bag machine to aid in our spicy time. Next story. Story 3. Not during. Just being too simple to understand a come on and missing the boat. At 16, I was volunteered by my mom to babysit a neighbor's 33 young kids while she went out with the girls to celebrate her divorce being final. Said lady came home at 2 a.m., found me on the sofa reading, plopped down in my lap, and thanked me for being so sweet and kissed me on the lips with a bit of tongue and rubbed her boobs on my chest. I panicked and stammered, "You're welcome," and fled. Damn, she was hot and I was just lame. What do you expect from a 16-year-old? This kind of opportunity plops into their lap, and they're not probably going to respond the way anyone expects them to respond. This is new to them. This 33-year-old, she's got a scenario playing out in her head that, maybe it's not the corn sites, but it's some other scenario that she thinks is going to go a different way. Not the case. This is panic mode, and kids, especially anyone who is panicking, is not going to go that way. Not the way you think. A little more communication, folks. Just communicate a little more.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Hey everybody, so it's summer, the weather's getting warmer, people want to gather. People want to get together, especially after the last couple of years. And we want to somehow gather the people together that we are related to. The ones that probably know us. The ones that know all those dark little secrets and quirks about us. For some reason, that seems like fun. Let's see what happens here. What's the worst thing at your family gathering? Story 1. It was an impromptu gathering. My grandfather, Dad's dad, had reached the point in his life where he couldn't live anymore. A nice facility was found for him that he approved of. Since he couldn't take everything with him when he moved, and he knew that I was moving out of my dad's basement and into my first home, he gave me permission to go through his furniture and let him know of anything I think I would need. I wasn't allowed to take anything, just make a note of it for my grandpa to approve or disapprove. I was perfectly fine with this and promised my dad I wouldn't take anything but pictures with my phone, so he gave me his copy of Grandpa's key. My sister comes along because this is the end of an era for us, and she wants to see the house one last time. We go in and see her wrapping her father's fine china and sticking it in a box. She's defensive and wants to know why we're there. I tell her what Grandpa offered me and that my sister is there to go through old memories one last time. She begrudgingly allows us to stay, but it's clear we're not welcome. We go snoop upstairs since we had never been allowed up there, and the entire time we're going through the rooms, this woman is yelling at us that the bed set is mine and the wardrobe is mine. We assure her again that we're not here to take anything. We go through the main floor, and it's even more clear that she makes sure we are not welcome. I make a point of blatantly ignoring her worries. My sister and I go into the basement and laugh at some of the old toys there that we remember playing with as kids, and are amazed that they've held up so well, along with the ancient TV that still had dials on it. As we head back up, Dad calls me and asks if we've taken anything. I tell him of course we haven't. That wasn't the agreement. He said that that's what he figured, but wanted to be sure. Turns out his sister had alerted his other sister, the one with power of attorney, that my sister and I were stealing from our grandfather. Dad tells us to leave and that he'll sort it all out. He thinks he's got everything straightened out and goes out to dinner with his then girlfriend, now wife. Not even an hour after he's left, one of my cousins starts a Facebook Messenger group with every single family member she can find on Facebook and proceeds to accuse me and my sister of being low class and how we'll always be low class. And that he's not even dead yet. I alert Dad, and he comes back and gets very drunk because now he knows what his family thinks of his children, and it upsets him. He demands an apology to us from both sisters and the cousin. The power of attorney sister immediately apologizes. Her daughter does not, and says she stands by what she said. The witch who started this whole thing refuses to get involved. Dad made it very clear that until they apologized, they were not welcome in his life, and canceled his plane tickets to Vegas to my cousin's wedding that he had been invited to. She tried to get him to pay her for what would have been his expenses. A couple years later, this same cousin texts me in private and apologizes. I say thank you and wish her a Merry Christmas. I never forgave her, and until she goes back to that stupid group and makes her apology as public as her insults were, I won't. Almost a decade later, I still don't talk to my dad's sister. As far as she's concerned, she's done nothing wrong. So as far as I'm concerned, I only have one aunt on my dad's side. Were they thinking that they were going to get everything, the sister? Why was there no communication? Did the grandfather not make it clear? Or did they just get drunk with power of attorney? It's kind of sad that these possessions were some things that were going to divide them. It didn't even sound like there was anything valuable. It just sounded like, hey, if there's something maybe you can use, something nice like that. Weird. Moving on. Story 2. The worst family gathering I was part of happened just this year. New Year's Day, in fact. My aunt has her birthday on that day, so the event was a combination of celebrating New Year's and her birthday. The entire thing took place in my uncle's bar, which is basically a large shed in the back garden. Nice little spot to hang out in. Less so when it suddenly has 16 people in it. There were quite a few people I didn't know in there, so I just stayed quiet for the most part and kept to myself by using my Switch or my tablet. Ooh, nice to have both. Context. I have high-functioning autism, and tech devices or plush toys are my go-to items to keep myself occupied and prevent stress. Being in a small space with too many people, making a fair bit of noise, and with music in the background is honestly a nightmare for me. What's worse is that my parents were not next to me. My grandma and someone else were what stood between me and them. I couldn't exactly get up and go over to them, and I was too worried that calling over to them or asking someone to get their attention would be seen as me making a fuss. I wouldn't put it past my grandma. She asked how I was doing, and when I answered honestly, she thought I was moping because everyone else wasn't doing what I wanted. She even mentioned that everyone else was enjoying themselves. This is the part of the reason why I can't stand her anymore. Trying to explain myself better met with dismissal. The odd couple of times I go to try and converse with her, her attention was easily pulled away by anyone else who wanted to talk to her or show her something. Rude. There were pretty gold-colored balloons in the room as well. I like them, but get nervous when people are rough with them. I don't do well when it comes to sudden loud noises. At one point, my uncle said they were taking up too much space on the floor and handed a small knife to one of the guests, telling him to pop them. I instantly grabbed my ears and tensed up. Sure enough, I heard one. I think my dad saw me, though, because no more happened. That was the one instance where my obvious discomfort was acknowledged, and it was only when I felt at my worst. We were there for about 2.5 hours, but it felt way longer than that. There were little snacks and things to pick at on the tables, but I was sitting in the one spot on the table where nothing was in reach. Once again, too nervous to speak up, I waited for something to be within reach. I'm not great with food, either. Despite the variety, there wasn't much I liked. I was hungry. My grandma urged me to go to the dining room inside the house where another spread had been put out. There was even less food that I liked in there. Not enough to satisfy my hunger. When I explained that to her, quietly, she got irritated and almost made it out that it was my fault. Hell, woman, you look after me for the weekends of 17 years of my life, and you act like you barely know me at all. And she's the one who wants to spend time with me again. I only got to speak to my parents again as we were about to leave. My dad asked me quietly if I was all right, and I shook my head, but gave a quiet but brief explanation of some of the stuff that happened, going into better detail once we got in the car. Both my parents apologized after realizing what a miserable time I had. They were actually shocked when I told them some of the things my grandmother said to me. It was all hugs all around and a decent meal once we got home. How old was this person? Does it say? It sounds like she was young. Hopefully not that young. But however young she is, I mean, she's still struggling with something that apparently no one else in the family understands. Did anyone try to take the time to do this? Or is it only the parents that are suffering, no, not suffering, but dealing with raising someone with autism like this? It seems like they're the only ones that understand. Was this something that she kind of had to make an appearance at? Well, I'm glad there's nothing that really bad happened, just a lot of discomfort. Story 3. A couple years ago, my aunt got an apartment in my town, and most of the family agreed that she would host Thanksgiving. It was a pretty fun time, and mostly everyone brought something to share with everyone else. One of my cousins, who was 20 or 21 while I was 19, and I was hanging out with a younger cousin from a different aunt that I consider a good little sister when she was 7 or 8 at the time. Well, my younger cousin was having a good time, but soon after everyone was just hanging out, she said she really needed to go to the bathroom. So she goes to the only bathroom in the apartment, and she finds out that my older cousin was in there, but she was in there for like about 20 minutes. So younger cousin bangs on the door so she would get out. Older cousin told her to go away because she was in there, and when I got involved, she told me the same thing, and I heard her say that I just go play because I wasn't an adult. Well, others overheard her saying most of that, but missed when she said I was still a kid. My younger cousin was still banging on the door, and her older brother and her mom is yelling at my older cousin to get out of the bathroom. At that point, she was locked in the bathroom for about 45 minutes. And when she finally gets out of the bathroom, reeked. And we found out that she was on her phone most of that time from her own sisters because she was playing games with them on her own. So my younger cousin rushes in and throws up, missing the toilet, and gets her brother to go in and help her as much as he can, and gets her to go to her room. He cleans up after her, and their mom, the one who hosted and has the apartment, was just yelling at my older cousin for hogging the toilet and forced her out. Too long didn't read. My older cousin gets in trouble for hogging the toilet at a Thanksgiving dinner, and little cousin throws up on the floor because of it. This just sounds like one person just ruining it for everyone else. Just didn't want to be there. I mean, sounds like the whole thing would have been a lot better if she was just left behind, if she didn't want to be a part of it. I realize that we all have to come together as families, especially, valuing being together after years of being forced apart. Some people just don't want to be social, it seems like. Jeez. Let's keep going. What's a fact you have just realized? The fact that I've just realized, not only do I have to actually start shaving and cleaning up before I record these videos, I have to do the same thing with my microphone. I checked my last video, and this windscreen is just looking kind of funky, especially when the green screen is taken out. So I gotta get some Windex or something and take it to this and some cleaner. Anyway, let's get on with the stories. Story 1. It's been a few years now, but I was out of college and had my current job before I finally found out the correct spelling and, relatedly, the etymology for the word ridiculous. I'd always assumed, based on the pronunciation here in the Midwest, that it must be spelled ridiculous. I'd never made the etymological connection to the word ridicule and had instead mentally parsed it as the prefix "re" plus "diculous," which I'd implicitly assumed must have come from a Germanic root, perhaps partly because I'd known the word from a very young age. Think diapers. But didn't learn the noun form, ridicule, until it appeared in a vocabulary/spelling list in the 4th or 5th grade. Never put 2 and 2 together until web browsers added the red squiggly underline feature. Mosaic released when I was in college. Mosaic, oh my God, that's even before my time. Normal people started hearing about the internet about the time I graduated, so yes, I'd had my current job for several years by the time browsers had a spell check in text areas. Yes, I know, I'm getting old. And my mom was embarrassingly old when she realized the 4-legged chicken she'd been fed as a child was rabbit. When she was real smart, her older brothers were concerned she wouldn't take it well if she knew they were eating the cute little bunnies. And then as she got older, they just kept calling it that out of, I don't know, family tradition or something. And yes, While the sun is useful for sorting out directions if you're in an unfamiliar area, there are plenty of us who just intuitively track direction in familiar areas. One time at work, a random stranger asked me where I went to college. Without even thinking about it, I pointed as I was answering, only realizing after I did so that pointing was kind of pointless since it's a 3.5-hour drive away. The first one? Yes, Mosaic I never used as a web browser. My first web browser was Netscape Navigator. If you ever want to look up the history of web browsing, look that one up. It's really interesting. Four-legged chicken? Ooh, I feel for that. Apparently, chicken is less cute than rabbits. I guess that's fair. That's just so bad. And also for directions, I grew up in one town for over 20 years, kind of a smaller town. I always went by landmarks. If you told me head east or head north, I would have had no idea what you're talking about. That still confuses me to this day. Anyway, moving on. Story 2. Something comforting. I legit have met not one, but 2 dogs who lived on a farm after their previous owners couldn't take care of them because they were both big dogs originally in city households. Separate families as well. One was my brother's dog who became my husband's neighbor's dog, and the other was first owned by my neighbor and later by my classmate's family. They both went on to be happy farm doggo. But keep in mind, these were both young, healthy dogs with no behavior issues that weren't caused from being cooped up with inadequate enrichment. My brother was actually honest with me, though, about having to put his dog up for adoption, and I found out later that my now husband's neighbor had an identical rescued farm dog, who he confirmed later was in fact the same dog. He recognized me. So now when I tell people about him, they give me this condescending, "Oh, honey," expression, and some don't believe me when I insist that this dog actually did go and spend the rest of his life on a farm in the country. Meanwhile, I thought my neighbor's parents were lying to her about her dog's fate when my classmate mentioned her dog's very specific breed mix, Catawalla Leopard, crossed with Husky, crossed with Chow. I'm probably pronouncing Catawalla incorrectly. Anyway, and name. And I asked if she knew my neighbors, and my classmate was like, "What the hell? That's the people we've got our dog from." Right now, I'm staying with relatives in the country and, well, in the hills, and there are dogs everywhere. So if you want to take some solace in saying, "Oh, our dog went to live on a farm," there are plenty of dogs out here on farms when I go out for walks. There are plenty. If I had permission to show you pictures of some of these guys, I would. They're absolutely adorable. So, story 3. Yes, the differences between American and British English. I'm not a native speaker. I'm from Germany and still live there. We learned about both British and American English in school, and I started to put on the English language in movies to learn more of the language, and started watching English YouTube content on stuff I was interested in. This included British, American, Australian, Canadian, and even non-native speakers. So yeah, I guess my English vocabulary is an odd patchwork of all kinds of dialects. Also, I know words from both variants for some things, so I regularly can't decide if to use flat or apartment, for example. I'm still impressed with the amount of words the English language has for the room with the toilets. Some call it toilet, some restroom, some lavatory, some washroom. Some even call it water closet or WC. And that's not even including colloquial terms like loo, potty. The SH word I can't say there. But on the other hand, German has also a bunch of names for the porcelain throne. One literally the word-for-word translation of porcelain throne. We also use WC and have toilette. While it's pronounced and spelled directly from the English toilet, it's obviously derived from the same French predecessor. I just think it's interesting that apparently the place where human excretion takes place, and the products of excretion have so many names in several languages. And also, it's weird to try and figure out which ones are the polite versions and which ones are not. And also, those phrasings can change depending on the action that you're taking there. I know that there are a couple that are used when you have had too much to drink and you're throwing up. And one of them, which I always thought was great, was talking to Ralph on the big white telephone. I always thought that one was my favorite. So let's keep going.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.